Hello CIM students, this video is about how to do relative coding. So we've talked about absolute coding so far, and so absolute is basically when we are working off of an origin, so x, y, and z origin of 0, 0, 0. And so we're not going to do that anymore, or at least we're not going to continue a complete code that works like that. We're actually going to do something a little bit different. So we're going to do something called relative. And so relative just works off of your previous place. So let's actually talk about that here for a second. So I'm going to draw some points on here, and we're going to actually look at the letter I, and we'll kind of talk about how we actually navigate through a full code creating a letter. So I'm going to mark some start and end points for my marks here. And I won't go through all these, I guess, but here we've got we're going to call this our origin. We have to have a PRZ. We have to have a place where we start. Okay. And so we're going to have this be our 0, 0 point on our X and our Y axis. Remember that the first number is always going to be your X. So first number is equal to X, and then the second number is equal to your Y. And so we basically need to, tell the machine where we need to go from point to point. So we'll start out actually with going from our PRZ to our point A. Okay, so if I have every grid here equal to 1 inch to kind of just make the math a little bit easier, we know that on the x-axis going this way, I have to go over 2 inches, and then I have to go up 2 on the y. Okay, so our first line, and we'll just kind of simplify this. So our line 1, our x is going to be 2, and our y is going to be 2. Okay. Now on line 2, let's say I want to go from A to B. So now what happens is that my A coordinate is now my new reference point. So you can almost imagine this as like your new PRZ or your new 0, 0 location. So from A, I'm going to go over, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 squares on the X coordinate. So X is going to be 4. And then because I don't move on the Y, that still stays 0. Now what happens is that my B point has now become my new 0, 0 point. So if I want to go to C, so line 3, my C point would be 2 spots back on the Y. Now whenever I move backwards on the Y-axis, so if I'm always moving up and to the right, that's always going to be positive. But if I move back and to the left, that's always going to be negative. And that's true for the X and the Y coordinate. So if I'm moving back from B to C, on the X coordinate, I'm moving back 2 spaces, okay? So now my X is going to be -2, but then my Y will still be 0 because I haven't moved up or down, okay? Now on line 4, let's say I call this D. Okay, so on line 4, now my x coordinate, if my point C is my 0, 0 point, now I'm going to be moving up on the y and nowhere on the x. So my x is going to be 0, and then my y is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so I'm going to move up on the 5. Okay, so that's the biggest thing to remember, is that you want to make sure that you're switching back from positive to negative, depending on whether or not you're moving backwards or down on the x or y coordinate respectively. Okay, now when you start out your code, you actually may want to start out by going from your home position on the machine to your origin point where you start in absolute coordinates. So you may want to establish an absolute coordinate to get you to where you want to start, and then you switch over to your relative code. So you're going to have to make sure that you write that in your code to switch that from absolute to relative in your lines. So a G90 is going to be your absolute, and then your G91 will be your incremental or relative. That would be the other code that you would use for that code right there. So again, start out with G90 to position yourself, and then switch over to a G91 so that you can go ahead and continue making all of your cuts based on whatever outline that you have there. Okay, that does it for this video. If you have any questions, as always, be sure to ask.